So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our OSOR workshop from Policy to Practice, Leveraging Public Procurement of Open Source Software. My name is Monika Sowińska. I work in the Interoperability and E-Government Unit in the Directorate for Digital Services, and of my responsibilities is to manage the Open Source Observatory. Before we start, the quick notes, but I'm sure you know all of them. I think that everybody introduced themselves and provided their names, so we don't see fellow Jitsters accounts. That's very good. But we also be grateful if you could introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where are you joining us. And please keep your microphones muted during the presentations. If you have any questions, share them in the chat as we go, and we will address them either just after each of presentations, or during the panel discussion later. So let's move to the next slide. Public procurement is one of the most powerful levers public administrations have to embed open source software in the public sector. But how can open source can effectively integrate it into procurement frameworks? What approaches are already being used by public administrations, and what practical steps can help ensure long-term sustainable adoptions? These are the questions, some of the questions we will explore together today, bringing perspective both from the European Commission and Finland's local authorities. We hope that today's session will inspire ideas and help you in your daily work by highlighting concrete ways on how to include requirements for including open source in the public procurement. So you see the agenda of today. In a moment, I will introduce our speakers. I will also talk about OSOR and Interoperable Europe community. We have some announcements to make. Then we will have two presentations, one from Mark Christopher Schmidt and the other one from Oli Ilha and Timo Velierhu. Sorry, Timo and Oli, for mispronouncing your names if it's the case. So on lessons learned from Finland's open source procurement guide. This will be followed by panel discussion, and we will try together to see how to break down barriers to open source procurement. Next slide, please. So I'm very happy to introduce our three speakers who will guide us through today's discussion. At least their presentations will guide us through today's workshop. So we have with us Mark Christopher Schmidt from DigiGrow. He is a policy officer and team leader for e-procurement, and the full name of the directorate, if you don't know, it's Director General for Internal Market, Industry and Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Mark has over 16 years of experience in digital public procurement, having worked on initiatives such as Ex-Vergabe in Germany and the EU Tendering Experts Group. At the Commission, Mark contributes to the efforts to modernize procurement frameworks and leads work on integrating digital tools such as eCertis, the interoperable single procurement document, and the public procurement data spaces. Today, Mark will provide an EU-level perspective of open source in public procurement, and then he will share his own experience in his projects where he included open source. Then we will have Oli Ilha from the Association of Finnish Local and Regional Authorities. He's a senior advisor specializing in public procurement at the association. He has extensive experience in supporting cities and local authorities with digitalization and procurement strategies, particularly in open source and collaborative projects. And Timo Velierhu, we cooperate with Timo quite often. He participates in our workshops both as a participant and a speaker. So thanks for joining us again. He is the executive director of COS, Finland's National Competence Center for Open Source, Open Data, and Open Standards. He's also a co-founder and a board member of APEL, the European Open Source Business Association. With the 20 years of experience in open source ecosystem, Timo has worked extensively on open source strategy, digital sovereignty, and community-based procurement models. Together, Oli and Timo, they co-authored, also I think there were other authors of this guide. So there's open source procurement guide for municipalities, helping the local governments adopt open source confidently and lawfully. We are delighted to have all three of you with us today. Welcome and thank you for sharing your expertise with us and with the broader community. Next slide, please. Before we start with the presentations, I would like to briefly talk about our observatory, OSOR. I see some familiar names and faces, so some of you know it very well, but for those who joined us for the first time, we would like to share some information. So the Observatory is a knowledge hub on open source in the public sector. We provide updates on interesting developments, practical guidance, best practices. We publish case studies, reports, and community resources, including monthly newsletter. So by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet to our newsletter, it is really worth doing it because you will get all the updates directly to your mailbox once a month. Next slide, please. So I will go very quickly through it, just to show some examples of our recent publications. For example, a multi-country study on how local governments across Europe are adopting and reusing open source solutions. And actually, this study also contains some interesting cases and recommendations regarding procurement. So I encourage you to look at it. Also, OSOR handbook that we hope to publish and update soon as a practical guide on open source for public administration. A very short, concise, but with interesting links and examples of recent case studies with all the links. As you can see, we are also publishing, we call them country intelligence reports now for over 52 countries, and they cover open source policies, governance models, and national strategies, interesting open source initiatives in those countries. So all of this can be found on OSOR that is hosted on the Interoperable Europe portal. One more slide on OSOR, and we can move to the essence of today's workshop. So again, with the links, our past events, today's event is also mentioned, and the future event on the 20th of November. More on that at the end of today's workshop. And I would like also to announce that we are very happy to bring to you new training courses that we cooperated with the Interoperable Europe Academy. They are very comprehensive, cover a lot of aspects of open source in a public sector, available for free. So those links are in this presentation that will be shared with you after the event. And for your future reference, please share it with your peers in your public administrations if you really want to make sure that upskilling regarding open source is happening. Next slide, please. So one more announcement. I would like to encourage all of you, if it's not done yet, to look at the Interoperable Europe community. This community is to bring together all interoperability-related initiatives: open source, open data, open standards, semantics, public sector tech watch under one umbrella. By joining, you can participate in consultations, working groups that will be created in the future, and online assemblies. The registration link we will share in the chat, or you have it actually here, a QR code, and you can do it in this way. I hope that many of you really will consider joining this community. You are also warmly invited to the first assembly, so please, share the next slide. That will happen on the 13th of November For this one, you don't need to be registered in the community. So please join, see if it's of your interest, if you can really contribute, if it's something that you could consider as your contribution to promote open source and making it something that is really adopted widely. And I think it is one of the ways that we could do it. So once again, I encourage you to join. Just to introduce my team, a part of my team, so OSOR core team members that are today here with us, Chloe Dusutur, Cindy Brandon Roche, and Amadine Courrier. They are today with us to facilitate this workshop. So now let's move to our first presentation. Please welcome Mark Christopher Schmidt from the European Commission DG GROW, who will discuss how open source fits into EU procurement framework, including examples like ESPD, E30s, and PPDS. These are acronyms for the projects that I mentioned in the beginning. Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I will now share. No, I need to just a second. I need to share my screen. That's a pity. Okay. Just a second.
Sure, no problem. In the meantime, I would like to remind participants that if during the presentation some questions come across your mind, please feel free to share them in the chat. There will be also a 10-minute Q&A at the end of Mark's presentation to address them.
So now you should be able to see the everything. So the idea of this talk is to split it into 3 sections, kind of an introduction. Then I will speak about the revision of the procurement directives, and then I will speak about the open source projects that we are in charge of when it comes to public procurement itself. So about, again, who am I? Monica said everything about me. Usually I'm referred to in the commission or with the colleagues as MC. It's much easier. And besides having more than 15 years of experience in e-procurement, I actually used to develop myself software. So I enjoy working with software. When it comes to the introduction, and that was very interesting. Last week, I was reading a computer magazine from Germany, and there they have mentioned it was about sovereignty in the EU. And there they've mentioned that 70% of the US the market in the EU on cloud services is backed by US companies. And what this article also mentioned is that it is very critical to use open source as a way to ensure sovereignty. I try myself as much as possible to use open source components because I think it is good to not to rely too much on the companies like Microsoft. And generally, we can see that there is much more attraction to use EU services or to move towards open source. There is a very important example from Germany, which is in Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, which moved actually this autumn to replace not only Microsoft Office, but also they have done the switch to Linux. I searched last week then for an article that I could share with you. I hope that you are able to read this a little bit. It's from the Register about the switch from Schleswig-Holstein to open source, where they have actually transferred 40,000 accounts for the municipal the government in Schleswig-Holstein to replace Microsoft Exchange with Open Exchange, and as the email client Mozilla Thunderbird. They actually started already a few years ago to do this transition. The first step was to replace Microsoft Office with LibreOffice. And as I said before, they already have moved also to Linux now. They are actually not the first one who moved towards open source. It was already the city of Munich. They already moved to Linux. They actually developed many years ago a Linux variant, which they called Linux. Unfortunately, in 2017, they have switched back to Microsoft. It was not because the project was a failure, it was more because the mayor was much more in line with Microsoft. So there you can see it is open source needs to be supported by the government in order to do the switch. What else? Then something that is what we see also at EU level is with the current, it's mentioned here that with the current geopolitical environment, that there's actually a strong intention to move towards open source. And in the example from Schleswig-Holstein, which is just next to Denmark, we see that Denmark is also very much interested to move towards, for specific areas, to move towards open source. And this article also mentions that, for example, the Austrian Defense Department is also, or has the interest in moving towards open source. So we see there is a good window of opportunity to move towards open source. Now we speak about the revision of the Public Procurement Directives, which actually I split into two parts. First of all, why is public procurement important? And then the actual revision of the Public Procurement Directives. So why is public procurement important? You
Maybe
have
Mark,
actually
sorry, if it's possible to share again if it's possible to try to share again your screen, because it's blurry half of the time. Apologies. Huh?
Okay. Is it okay like this now?
Super, thank you.
Okay. So with the revision of the directives, 250,000 buyers spend every year something like 2.5 trillion euro, which is about 15% of GDP. So in important things like infrastructure, education, social protection, energy, waste, and health, and the roads that you are taking, or the hospitals, they are always procured through public procurement. Also, the IT systems that are used by the governments are procured to open source. So public procurement plays a very crucial role. We had once a meeting with an association on open source, or an association, and they said that the public institutions play a critical role to give contracts to IT companies regards to open source. Now, what you see here is a link of TED. So out of curiosity, I started to search for procurements above the EU thresholds, which starts at, for service and goods, above 200,000 euros, and for 2025. And what you can see here is we have actually 202 findings. So you can use TED to find for business opportunities which are related to open source. If you write open source together with quotation marks, then it will find exactly the right term. And I will just go to the one from Norway. So if I go down, I think I have to go a little bit more down. Here you can see, for example, they are using Red Hat for open source. So you can use this to identify potential business opportunities if you're a supplier, to find interesting procurements in case you're looking for business opportunities for open source. And you can see it is actually done by public administrations. Now, for the revision of the Public Procurement Directives, we are currently working on revising the Public Procurement Directives and what is publicly available from this in the State of the Union, from Ursula von der Leyen, or from the mission letter from the Executive Vice President Stéphane Séjourné. So he's the commissioner for DG Grow, where I'm working for. They say they have actually 3 points that are very relevant. One is there's a efficient public investment. There is a need for consistency of the legal framework, simplification of procedures, and a digital design by system. First of all, we have actually not one public procurement directive. There are actually 4 or 3, and we want to they need to be simplified. Something that I'm personally very happy about is that it is recognized also by the very senior management that whatever we do needs to be designed to be digital by design. So that will be an important part. Other aspects which are more of strategic dimensions is, for example, Made in Europe vision. So the idea is to create lead market, secure EU economy capacity in strategic sectors, and strengthen our competitiveness. So in one way or the other, there will be something about EU preference to see how can we, in important sectors, how can we ensure more resilience. And then, of course, the strategic role of public procurement. Public buyers should be better enabled to take into account long-term economic benefits, including quality, innovation, resilience, which is, of course, very important, and in environmental and social considerations. So there are many aspects where the new directive or the new legislative framework on public procurement will help to support that the EU will become more strategic, more resilient, and it will be more digital. Then there is, of course, information provided on our website about the process. First of all, we actually have we are currently here with the evaluation report. So it was published last week. The evaluation report it shows backwards to understand, to better understand the directives from 2014. So we evaluated, have we reached the objectives of the 2014 directives? And of course, the answer is no. The current directives, they have several issues. So that is also one of the reasons why we will revise the public procurement directives. The next step is we do a so-called call for evidence and public consultation. So I hope that in November, we will start an open consultation where anyone in the EU can provide their input on how the new directives or the new legislative framework should evolve in various aspects. This will have the results of this will be playing an important role in the then work. The next step would be then the impact assessment. So we take the feedback from the consultation into our impact assessment, which will say, these are the cornerstones of where we want to head, and these are the different policy options. We will go through the different policy options, and then we will provide also a commission proposal. The idea is to have the commission proposal available already in the next year, so the timeline is very tight. And then the official legislative procedure starts, which means that the trialogue between the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission, they will discuss our proposal and see how it needs to be refined to also meet with the overall objectives, to say it needs to be simplified, it needs to be digital, it needs to be EU preference, and we need to allow buyers to work more strategic. Then open source in our projects. We have actually 3 examples. The first one is the so-called European Single Procurement Documents. The European Single Procurement Document is a self-declaration that was stemming from the last directive, which says if a company participates in a public procurement procedure, they don't need to provide for the submission of the offer already all the certificates. It is sufficient usually just to provide the ESPD. And even though it was a normal legal act, we have developed an open source service around this. We went live with this in April, I think it was March or April 2016. And something that we have done, because as I said, open source is something which is very dear to my heart. We designed from the very beginning that it will become open source so that member states could also pick up the code, which we have published at this time on GitHub. And we saw that already in this year, member states have started to reuse the code that we have developed to better integrate this into their service. Besides that, we provide the open source code. We also provide a service. So we operated the ESPD, and in 2018, it was one of the most used services that the Commission provided. And I actually have to say, I was very proud about this. And we have nevertheless decided to close down our service because the ESPD, the European Single Procurement Document, works better if it is integrated in the e-procurement services of the member states. So we shut this down, and then a lot of member states just have reused our code and published this on their website. The link here is to what is the ESPD about. But what I want to show here is, if I go down, you see here several countries who are still providing an ESPD service based on our open source service from several countries. So you see, if you design a software from the very beginning to be open source, depending on how you communicate this to the outside world, it will actually be used, which is great. The second example is about eCertis. eCertis is a tool which is complementary to the European Single Procurement Document. So the ESPD is about a self-declaration to show how can you, that you have paid your taxes, or that you have paid your social security contributions, or what your yearly turnover is. And eCertis is actually a software which shows for each country how can a supplier in that country show that they have paid taxes, or that they have paid social security contributions, or that they are not in bankruptcy. So eCertis is the tool to say, how can this actually be done from the supplier side? And it's very often used by buyers as well as suppliers. And when we went live with this service, even though I was hoping that we use open source from the very beginning, we still use the IT stack, what was used for all applications inside the Commission. So we used WebLogic and Oracle database, and we have now replaced WebLogic with Tomcat, and we will, the aim is to replace Oracle with Postgres. The third example is the so-called Public Procurement Data Space. The Public Procurement Data Space is a service where policymakers, buyers, companies, and other stakeholders can access public procurement information in a much more innovative and transparent way. From the very beginning, we said that the PPDS should be cloud agnostic, because the idea is that the member state should be able to say, we are interested in reusing the aspects of the PPDS for ourselves. And we see kind of a trend, and last year there was still this kind of to make the solutions more cloud native. So if you're using AWS, then you should much more use the functionality that AWS provides to make it much easier for you to run it on this cloud. But we said, also when this analysis was done, we said we want to stay cloud agnostic, because we cannot ensure that if a member state would take this service, that they always have AWS or Azure or something else. And with the current situation, I think it was a good idea to stay as much as possible cloud agnostic. We still use one or two technologies coming from AWS, which we will also replace in the future. So we use for the messaging, for example, SQS. But the aim is also to replace this with a cloud agnostic service. So the idea is that the member states have the possibility to reuse the components. One thing that is very important, especially for buyers, if you are moving to this way, it needs to be very clear to the contractor from the very beginning. So it is not something where you start in the middle of the process and say, oh, we think now it should become open source, because then it is much more complicated. The buyer should, from the very beginning, say, this is our strategy. It should become open source or cloud agnostic. Some final remarks. Public procurement does not prevent buyers to procure open source software or services. It is really the decision of the buyer or from the government. If the government does not support the move towards open source, it will be very difficult for the buyer to move along. But there, at least for the backend services, it might be possible still to to foster much more open source, especially when it comes to cloud services. There are plethora of examples available. I mentioned just a very few of them, where we show that the use of open source is actually very feasible in public administration, and why shouldn't it be, to be honest? And my last sentence would be, I think it is really a strategic choice of the buyer or the government to support open source. and to lead with best practice in this regard. So I don't know if there are any questions now.
So, indeed, we are checking if there are any questions in the chat. Thank you very much, MC, for this insightful presentation and showing us this important link between open source with Europe's digital sovereignty, and also insights regarding in which direction the revision of the Public Procurement Directives is going. So thanks a lot. We will have a chance to discuss it later also in the panel discussion, but I would like to see if there are any specific questions to your presentation now, because we have a moment to answer them. Cindy, anything?
No,
Maybe
I.
out of curiosity, can I ask, maybe you can write this in the chat, how many of you are actually buyers of public for services are good? Is there a buyer participating in this round? You can use the chat just to write if you are a buyer. I assume that most of the okay.
We have Michael from Michelle from Austria. Hello. Who confirmed?
So we have mainly, I think, suppliers participating in this talk.
Not only, I see some so there are representatives of public administrations that probably they are not involved in the procurement themselves, but they are interested in the topic since they are here with us.
So indeed,
okay.
I don't see any questions in the chat for now, but we came prepared. Oh no, there is one from Kara.
What do you think about having the idea of EU sovereign tech fund? So just for the others, sovereign tech fund is actually coming from Germany. It's something I would say rather innovative. It is where they have some budgets, they have budget which they can use to finance specific aspects in open source software. So, for example, they have funded to update specific aspects of C-Curve, or they also have requested to update specific aspects of FreeBSD. And I think it is a very important aspect that government not only use open source, but that they actually fund open source infrastructure or software, which is critical for the running, because open source software, they need to be funded in one or the other way. It cannot be only hobby projects. There was this one, but I can't remember which software it was, which was used everywhere. I think it was a huge scandal. It was in the last year where someone was introducing, he got to know the maintainer of this one, and then he introduced actually a kind of a, yes, exactly. And then just by accident, it was found out that there is actually a backdoor in it. So I think it is important that we have governments who take budget in their hand to financially support open source software, which is critical. Then So that was the first question. Then some of us are procurement auditors. Ah, okay, that's super. That's good. I procure once in a while, but I'm not a procurement officer. Okay. Yeah, very often you do this on a daily basis. I usually don't procure myself, but I now procured something. So if you don't do this on a regular basis, it is something which takes some time to get into. EIT, Urban, and many thanks for sharing also the link to the XZ tool. Mobility funds pilots, which ideally continue as procured solutions in cities. I'm mainly active in the areas of city data platforms, digital twins, etc. That's good. So it's, I think really, if the governance would invest even a small fraction of what they usually pay Microsoft or Oracle, I think they can have a huge impact on the quality and to help the open source community. I have a questions regarding open source software as a KPI. Okay, please go ahead, Maria.
You can also open your mic if you want, Maria, if you want to elaborate on the question.
Or you can text it.
Okay. In the meantime, we have another comment.
Another question I see. I think having a strategy for buying is not enough. Without any law directive, it is very hard for. Are there any procurement laws? I mean, there are, of course, procurement legislation. All the countries have it, but open source should not be part of a law. This will never happen because I don't expect that there will be a legislation which will mandate the procurement of open source. Of course, it would be for buyers much easier if they could say there is a legislation that says we need to buy or we must buy to abide the legislation. But I personally don't think that even from the EU or from the member states, there will be really a legislation which says you must procure open source software. I don't think that will be the case. And also, it is usually, as I said, a governmental decision or a regional decision on if there's the support of moving towards open source, because it's not something done. It's not something done very quickly. It takes a number of years, so it's a very strategic discussion. But perhaps open source, yes, that could be. But I still I don't know. I don't know. You can certainly. I would strongly suggest that you should. When we do this open consultation, which will start in probably a month, then please provide this as an input. Since you are not allowed to require proprietary solutions, you sometimes do not.
Sorry, do you hear me? It's Maria.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I wrote something. I misspelled a bit, so I'll ask my question instead. My point is that when you are procuring, you are allowed to say that I would like to procure a service and I would like to have, for instance, an open source solution. But you're not allowed to write in a procurement document that you would like to have a proprietary solution. So how the value is finding open source as a KPI?
It cannot be an exclusion or selection criteria. What it can be could be an award criteria. So I think what would work very well is to say that you say the proposed solution, if it is based on open source, you give it more weight than if it would be proprietary. So there are possibilities on how you can increase or to support that you want to have open source. And what we did, it was not a technical. It was not really a technical criteria. What we did was once that we said our solution should be based mainly on open source. If not, there is always this exception. If it doesn't fly, then we can also use proprietary software, but it should be based on open source components.
Mm.
And it wasn't questioned. So I think that is also possible. Since you're not allowed to require proprietary solutions, yes, this is what you just also wrote. Yeah, you cannot write, you want to have Microsoft. It's the same. You cannot write, you want to have a BMW or Volkswagen. That would not work.
Okay.
open source
I think we, with this question of Maria, we will finish this this part on Q&A, and let's keep the questions that are still appearing in the chat for the panel discussion and Q&A after the panel discussion. For all those that still have some ideas what they would like to ask Mark, please put your questions in the chat. And now I would like to thank you, Mark, for this presentation again, and please stay with us for the following one and for our panel discussion that will be after the second presentation. So now I would like to welcome Olli Ilhe from the Association of Finnish Local and Regional Authorities and Timo Velihäraihu from KOS. And they will introduce Finland's open source procurement guide for municipalities and lessons learned from the process of working on them. So this guide is a practical handbook helping public authorities at the local level to include open source intenders with legal and operational guidelines. Olli and Timo, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello. I'm gonna start. So just a moment. I'm not so used to this this software, so let's see if I can share my screen.
Oh, we hope that you can get better,
Do you see it now? Is it my
to
screen now?
this is the screen that is shared by Cindy.
Yes, I remove it and.
Okay. Well, let's try again.
The tricky part is that you have to select the window that you want to showcase and then say share. Okay,
so I cannot share the whole screen.
As well, there is a tab
okay.
You can select the whole
So it says to me that I'm sharing my screen now. Is it working to you or not?
No.
No.
Do you want me to share maybe for you, Olli?
Yeah, maybe if you just open the presentation, I can then say that, okay, change the page.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will do that. Give me a second.
I'm actually the backup. Elisa should have come here to talk about these guidelines, but she couldn't make it. So
we will be nice to you.
Yeah. So I had like 1 hour to have a look what's on the PowerPoints and so on. Timo knows the guidelines better than I do. I was part in the part of the public procurement. So in the beginning, you had the short notice who is who, and mine was actually Elisa's Elisa's one. So I will give a short introductions. I'm Olli, and I have been working with public procurement for about 15 years. I have been chief of procurement for a few years, and then procurement specialist. And at the moment, I'm working in the public procurement council unit. So we give legal advices how to do procurements. And I did take part in doing these guidelines, but only the procurement part. So I wasn't playing a great role in this one. Elisa was the main one, but she couldn't make it today. So you have to get the guideline basic things from me, not from the main guru. We could go to the next page. So the guidelines was done with Association of Finnish Cities and Municipalities, and also Finnish Center for Open Systems and Solutions. Timo is gonna talk a little bit more about them later. And why this guidelines done? It was like this, that we have this ITC department in the Association of Finnish Municipalities, and we got a lot of questions. How can we do open source procedures? And there was a lot of this kind of thinking that it's very difficult, or there's a lot of legal obstacles for doing open source procurement, or is it safe because it's open? So we decided to do this kind of guidelines. It's pretty basics about open source. And we did it together with the municipalities. So we had like 4 workshops where we discussed about different parts of the guidelines. We could go to the next page. And basically, it doesn't go very deep about how you do the open source procurement, or what is the open source procedure. It's like 60 pages long, and it has a pretty standard view what is the open source and what is not, and when you can use it and when you shouldn't use it. We could go to the next page too. The last one is actually the one that I'm going to talk the most. So this is just it's in Finnish, so you cannot get it, but it has like very basic information about how the open software works. What are the roles in the open software? Who has to contribute to the open source, and things like that. Maybe we go to the next page. So that's the one that I can talk the most. Okay, well, this is how about this? You go to the last page, and then we come to this page. Elisa would like to have talk like first things, and I would like to first talk about the what's the included to the guidebooks. I changed the dias a bit, but because I cannot show them, it's in the different order. So basically, what's in the guidelines? First, there is the definition of open source. What is open source, and what's the definition of this one and that one? And then there is the background information to what kind of problems the open source can help you with. Like, let's say that you make a contract in Microsoft. You're married with the Microsoft for the future. And with the open source, it's much easier to change the producer for yourself. So this kind of background information why you should use the open source is on the second point. Then we have a part of open source procedures, how you should do the procedure, what kind of aspects you should evaluate. You should have like market negotiations beforehand. You start the procurement and so on. Then we have conclusions from legal cases of Finnish Market Court. When can you use the open source? How can you use the open source? And when you cannot use it. There was a question about this legal aspects, and according to the Finnish Market Court, you can set the rules that you only accept the open source formula because it's open for everybody. Everybody can try to use it. So in legal sense, there's no nothing that would make it that you couldn't use the open source. That's maybe the basic points. And then there is a checklist, steps by steps, how you can make the open source successful. And now maybe we can jump one page before. So this is just one of the examples of Finnish public procurement, this kind of Evakka. It's this kind of e-service. We have e-services nowadays for all the public units, and this Evakka, it used to be, it was closed source program, and it was quite expensive. So few of the big cities decided that they want to start develop through open sourcing this kind of competitive system. And a few years back, they came up with this Evakka. And when your child is in a childcare, all the information about your child from the childcares comes to this Evakka system. So this is just one example about this open source. But as said before, I step into, because Elisa couldn't make it and I didn't have much time to prepare, so I hand it over to Timo, who is who knows this much better than I do.
Okay, thank you. So can you see my presentation now? It's
Yes.
shared. Yes, good. So, yeah, my name is, well, a little bit backward. Yeah. So my name is Timo Väliharju, and as introduced before, I'm Executive Director in Open Source Finland and also co-founder and member of Management Board Apple in European Open Source Business Association. So I'm one of the writers of the guide, and I would say that the reason that we started to do this is, of course, kind of because municipality and Kuntaliitto wanted us to do it, but we designed the kind of a project in a way that we are not giving specific procurement advices as such, that if you have a case like this, you should do this, and if you have a case like this, you should do that. It's more or less educational kind of a tool that tries to teach the municipalities that what actually is open source and what makes it different to procure, because there's a lot of misconceptions about how to get open source in various ways, and this 15 minutes is not going to take at the time that I can explain everything inside of the topic, but it's an interesting topic, and I would say that in generally speaking, the municipalities are getting a little bit more expertise in the subject. So when you are thinking about the most common challenges what the municipalities face when they are trying to procure open source is, I think, unfamiliarity. So they don't know open source communities, they don't know how the open source communities works, and they even don't know that what are the open source communities that they should actually participate, or try to think that is this that kind of a community that we could procure. They don't know the companies behind the open source communities, not in the local ones that are doing the service business with some particular open source tool like Drupal, and they don't know how the community works. So it needs quite a lot of expertise in that. Then, in generally speaking, the municipalities are very conservative, so they usually don't want to take some new, steps to go to other procurement process. So it's safer to continue with proprietary systems in a way that we always done in this way. I've been consulting quite a lot of municipalities also in particular procurement cases, and when you get the first version of the procurement document that they have been doing in the municipality, it usually you can say that okay, this looks like it's a copy paste from the previous proprietary software procurement. So you need to do quite a lot of things in order to get that to turn to the open source way. So then municipalities face support concerns. They think that the open source communities don't support them if they are trying to procure, or there's a lack of support in the future, which is of course not true, because there's a lot of companies, doing services with certain open source open source communities. So there's a lack of knowledge that how the market works when you are procuring open source. Then they feel that they are no expertise, or the expertise gap is too wide. So they don't think that they can find skilled people later to do it. So and also difficulty in cooperation. So they are willing to co-develop, but they are no clear partners or clear process to do it. So I would say that there is a half and half. So some of the municipalities think that the all open source procurement is more or less buying a tailored software. So they need to go to the process that they design, kind of what they want, what is the end results, and how do they want the end results to work. But they also usually forgot that there is also other side. So you can actually buy package software as open source. So there's a lot of communities that are actually mature enough that you can actually buy as it would be proprietary software, but it's still open source. So there's a lot of this kind of misconceptions in the municipalities when you talk with the people there. I was actually 2 hours ago speaking to the city of Tampere, kind of ICT staff. There was 77 people in ICT, listening about open source and what it is and how it works. And then there was one kind of a person that started to talk that, yeah, but open source is something that you need to invest, and I don't want to work free to open source, and it's kind of a hobby stuff and so on and so on. So when there is a people in municipalities ICT that don't actually really understand that how open source works, it's very difficult to even talk about procurement if you don't clarify the things that how it's done. So if you are thinking about the strategic benefits of open source, I think the strategy alignment is one thing. So basically, it supports goals of openness, collaboration, and sustainability, which are the key values of any municipality, and that this should be. Then there is a co-development, so municipalities can reuse each other's solutions and share costs. Then there's a vendor independence, no lock-ins, easier to change suppliers. And cost control, long-term costs remain predictable in a way. So if you are thinking about the content management system business in general, when you think about the time 10 years ago when there's quite a lot of proprietary softwares to do, like municipalities, web pages and stuff like that. So now I don't know actually any proprietary software that actually is in the market and still up and running in the municipalities. All is Drupal, or all is kind of some other open source, tools that they use. And at the same time, in 10 years ago, the project for the municipalities was costing like 500,000 euros. Now it's costing 50,000 euros. So when the municipality procures, the costs go down if the market is ready for that. Of course, there is open source products in certain fields that are not going to work like this yet, but in the future, yes. Then there is a transparency and security, so code can be inspected and trust increases. And of course, influence, so municipalities can shape to some extent at least the development directly. So if we go to the procurement features and the legal basis, so what we try to explain to the municipalities and also kind of answer to the worries that they has is that that there is also different vendors in the market that are talking about the open core, which means that it's really not open source. So if municipality is trying to make procurement, you should definitely see that if it's open source, if it's proprietary, or is it open cores that have some risks. So it's a not good situation that you end up, procuring a open core that actually they told it that it's almost open source. Then after a year you realize that, okay, we have a problem because it's not particularly open source in this sense that we actually thought that it would be. Then there is a void of loggings in the procurement. So that vendor log we all know, but there is also another kind of logs that you can actually end up in the open source procurement. So IPR log is one of those. So supplier holds intellectual property and limits rights to modify, or there can be different licenses, open source licenses that are not actually fit together. So there's a compliance issue. So you may end up in the situation that maybe year or two that okay, there's a license, are contradicting. So we shouldn't use them as in the same product. So problems. Then the big thing also is that that nobody usually thinks about it's a competence login. So there may be a goodwill from the municipality point of view that they want to buy open source. Then they go to the, let's say, ICT procurement kind of a process that they previously competed, let's say, 2 or 3 supplier and vendors to the municipality to do kind of tailored software projects. Then they go in and make a tender, and they try to procure open source to this and this and this purpose. And at the end of the day, it ends up in the situation that there is only one supplier or a few experts that actually knows the system. So basically it's open source, but there is no community pack in behind of the tool, and nobody actually knows how to develop it further. So that's also a dangerous log that you can be in. And then a third one is also data log. So everything else could be okay, but the export of the data from the system or reuse outside of the system may be very complicated, or even in some cases impossible. So you need to think about these things also when you go to the procurement. Then the community power. So the global communities often have more capacity than single vendors. So we try to also teach to the municipalities that when you are trying to procure open source in certain process, you need to evaluate the communities before. And after you evaluate the communities, you look about that how big it is, how many companies are supporting the community and doing business with it, how many developers there is, in how many countries, languages, and so on. So that gives you an idea that if this is the community that I can actually use as a product in procurement. Then support model, there's tons of different support models when you do the procurement. And in open source, you need to understand that what are the models as a customer. You cannot actually just rely on short warranties or things like that. You need to understand what you want in the procurement. Then of course how the error correction goes, community or contracted vendors or otherwise. And also exit strategy. This is very, very important. So when you make a procurement, you need always an exit plan if something goes wrong. And you need, of course, this also in open source, but also in proprietary software. So if something happens, you need to go, let's say, another open source vendor that is doing exactly the same code. And then one point I'm trying to emphasize here. So from the legal perspective, the current procurement law in Europe actually it makes it possible that municipalities and in every other organization also, they can tender open source in a product by name. You don't need to go there and make a tender and a procurement in a way that we want a learning management system, or we want the content management system, or we want ERP, this and this and this. You can say that, okay, I want Moodle learning platform, I want the Drupal content management system, or I want Odoo as a ERP. There are several court cases in Europe that that the courts case by case see that if it's truly open source, choosing not to offer it's a business decision. It's not something that is actually, discriminating proprietary vendors because you are procuring with certain brand name. That's okay in open source world. In proprietary world, it's not, because nobody else can do it if you are not the company that owns the code and owns the licenses to the system. So what we end up in the guide, we defined a few practical procurement steps to support the municipalities to do the procurement. So you need to first define why the software is needed and what are the benefits that are expected, and check if there is already ready-made open source solution existing before you are starting new development. In most of the cases, there is, and if there is not, there's let's say 3 or 4 different open source communities that are actually global communities that you can use as a base technology. So you can start developing something new, but you can do it with Drupal framework, or you can do that with Odoo framework. So you don't need to go to the library level in the development of the software, or even do from the scratch. Then you need to decide the scope. So if it's a package community solution or development project, and you ensure that responsibilities are clear inside the municipality, and assess how the new system fits into the existing ICT landscape that you actually have in the municipality. So there's a lot of different angles that you need to think before you go to the procurement. So it's not just about the cost savings, it's also these kind of benefits that you will have, which have value more than euros. But of course, at the end of the day, we all want that if you do open source procurement, it will be cheaper in the long run than to do it with proprietary software. So I think that with the careful preparation, the open source creates quite flexible and future-proof, way to procure public services and do the public services with different open source solution, and fully complying also with the procurement law. So, and maybe one comment to the European discussion regarding the new European procurement law that is coming to the kind of it is starting to form up. So there's quite a lot of debate on that. Should we buy European, or should we buy open source European, or not buy open source outside of Europe? So I think that the open source the natural form of open source is global. So of course there is a European open source, but it doesn't matter if the open source come from Brazil, of US, or whatever country, if it's true open source, because you can fork it, you can use it in Europe, you can do services in Europe, you can do some work with the community, but you can also make a European community. So I think that at the end of the day, the open source is the only thing that makes the public procurement actually safe and open and transparent. If you go only by European, you actually end up in the situation that you can be. It doesn't matter what is the vendor log, if it's coming from the Europe or US. That's my opinion in general sense. So thank you for this, and I'm open for this discussion and also questions. And of course, you can say that you're not right. It's also a good thing to do.
Thank you very much, Timo, and thank you again, Oli, for those practical insights, some inspiring examples like Vaca. but most and foremost to showing us that, in your guidelines, you could provide really very clear instructions how to approach the open source procurement, and also dismantling some misconceptions about the procurement of open source. So once again, thanks a lot. And now I have a question to our audience. Before we move to the panel discussions, do you have questions to this presentation? I see that there are some in the chat. So first, maybe we will start with those in the chat, and I also encourage you to raise your hands and voice your questions in that way. Cindy, over to you, if you could choose the first question.
Yes, so there was actually a first, let's say, practical question from Michael, who was asking if there is a download link for an English version of the guide.
Yeah, sorry to say there is not yet, because we didn't have resources to translate it in English. But I would say that if you download it from the I will try to find the direct link in here in a few moments. But if you download it there and then you throw it to the AI, I think that you will get quite a good translation actually after that. So it's a practical way to do it.
So yes, please share it. I think everyone they would be very curious to have a look.
And then just on that same questions, I continue my small marketing for the OSOR content, just to say that in soon, so either in the coming weeks or in a few weeks, there should be on OSOR a case study on the procurement guidelines, which will be in English, so you will also have the possibility to learn a bit more about the content through the case study that will be soon published, so stay tuned.
Thank you, Chloe, for mentioning it. Indeed. Then there was a second question from Daniele, who was asking, do you have a fine if you do not look or search for open source? I think it was linked to Timo, the fact that in your practical steps you were saying that yes, one of the practical steps is actually if you know the requirements, then you can look for already existing open source solutions. I don't know, Daniele, if I translated correctly the question, if that was the spirit. Yes. Okay. So the question is, do you have a fine? Can you have a fine if you don't look or search for open source solutions?
I'm not really following. I'll try to read the question here. So yeah, so basically, if you need to check that what is open source and what is not, you need to look the license first. So there is a certain OSI proofs licenses that if they're used like a GPL or AGPL or EUPL or something like that, so it's open source and you can actually rely that it is. But if there is some kind of peculiar own licenses that are developed particularly to that project or whatever, you shouldn't trust them as such. You need to try to figure it out quite deeply, that is this something that is really open source, or is there some catches later on. And there was a to the reference to the open AI, and I would say that it's pretty good actually to clarify if the license is open or not. So I've tried it once or twice myself, and it's quite good actually. Then you can get a big picture from the AI and then go deeper with yourself.
Thank you, Timo. And I think that I'm not an expert, but I don't think that you get a fine if you. I don't. Do they fine? Okay. They have a fine if they do not look search. And your question also, Daniele, was it related to as a municipality, if I don't look or search for open source solution, can I get me a fine?
Okay. No, absolutely not. No. Yeah, there is. I think that there is not that kind of a law in Europe in general that actually could get you fined as a person or organization if you are not looking for open source. So I think that it needs to go in a way that we, of course, look good solutions. For my opinion, open source is in most of the cases better solution than proprietary for the various reasons. So in that sense, no fines, for everyone.
Then we have another question from Ioannis, who is asking, so is the real question, if the real question is not more, is it about having open versus closed softwares, but rather how we ensure sustainability, security, and accountability? And Ioannis is also asking what happens if an open community becomes inactive, and who guarantees support when there is no vendor application?
Yeah, yeah, I think that in general sense, you shouldn't go to the communities that are basically in small and not so big with certain criteria. So you need to assess your risks when you go to the communities and try to
Yeah.
have a procurement with that. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is that if community shut downs, it's usually already a community that you would think that, okay, this is maybe not something that would actually last for long. But if it goes sour in some way, probably you need to find kind of an exit to the other kind of a community, or then search that if there is a fork of that community. So
Yeah, maybe I could say that most of these public side open source, the municipalities have some kind of agreement that they're gonna be part of the community. So they have
yeah.
agreement that they're gonna keep developing the program, or paying somebody to develop it.
Yeah, and there's always a companies that are interested to develop. The point is that if they do it without community, it can be also dangerous. So you need to create a link between with the community to the company and to the customer. So it's a party that all are required in the equation in order to succeed.
Do we have any other question in the chat? Thank you, Timo. Thank you, Oli. Or if you want to also, okay, we have a long one just coming up from Sabrina. So, isn't adoption of open source solutions for public administration fully achievable only when public administrations are not only supported in how to public procure open source solutions, but also guided towards the establishment of OSPOs, either internal or external? Do you think, do you have a take on how OSPOs can be established or play an important role in this open source transition?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that there is quite a lot of OSPOs already not in the municipality level, and maybe in governmental level there is OSPOs, and also actually quite a lot of companies have OSPOs nowadays. So in my view, I think it's a good tool to 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 go more open source in the municipalities. I would say that for example, the big municipalities could actually partner with the smaller municipalities and actually create, OSPOs together. So not in a way that there is a one OSPO in one municipality, but to try to get regional OSPOs depending of the country and structure of the municipalities. But certainly I think it's a good way to do it. And also it's very important to support municipalities, exactly what I was talking about today. So the knowledge sharing to the municipalities, that how actually procurement is done in open source way, and what open source is, and how do you navigate in that world.
So
Yeah.
indeed, it's a very valid in question and answer. And when it comes to OSPOs for municipalities, we have some examples, because those entities that are rarely called OSPOs, but as you know, there are associations that have some functionalities, some functions as as national OSPOs for the national level of government. So, for example, OS2 in Denmark, or we have IMIO in Belgium. So they serve as kind of OSPOs, but and indeed this is important that actually they should act together and join forces, because having OSPO but there are cases, as you know, in Paris or in Bratislava, when we have OSPOs at the city level. So it all depends, as you said, Timo, on the governance structure in a given country, administrative levels, and so on. But one of the OSPO's roles should be actually guidance on open source procurement and collaboration with procurement officer. We agree with that. I think that I interrupted. Maybe Oli wanted to say something. I had an impression that I heard something.
Yeah, I was just saying that you have a different kind of open source. So I don't think that this kind of OSPO is always necessary. But of course, Timo is more. But I think we have like Koha, where you have a like official organization that is overseeing it for the municipalities.
Okay, so there are different solutions possible.
But it's only for the library system, so it's one open source system.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's we are just in right time to move to our panel discussions. So thank you for this presentation and all the answers to the questions from our audience. And we would like now to invite you, all three speakers, Mark, Christopher, Oli, and Timo, to answer the questions, both the ones that we prepared for them, but also our participants. Please feel free to again put questions in the chat. Cindy, again, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Monica. So indeed, we have, as Monica said, we have prepared some questions for our speakers. What was interesting is that for some of those we already had bits of answers, but it's okay. The idea is to have cross perspectives also on those questions. So the first one that we had was the following. So beyond the legal framework that we have been talking about, and beyond the legal aspect of procurement, what are the operational challenges that to procuring open source in, let's say, your organizations? So actually, Timo, you already started listing some of those, or presenting some of those. You talked about the fact that it was unfamiliar, conservatism, expertise gap. So I'm also inviting the others maybe to provide their views and also see if they relate to what was also shared during Timo's presentation. Mark, Christopher, for instance.
Okay, so as I said before, it's the first of all, there needs to be a strategy to move towards open source. So it's not just that you all of a sudden say, "Oh, I like open source so much, I would like just to switch." So there needs to be a little bit more thinking behind this, better even a strategy to say this should be really part of how we move forward. Also, it is a little bit about where you are standing currently. There is this in the IT, there's usually this saying, never change a running system. And so people are afraid usually of new things. So if something has worked, it's just more about keeping the systems alive as they are, but not to rethink if they should maybe move towards open source. So you need to have a strategy behind it. There was also something, and that is also could be related to this one. I think it was from Maria. It was about the costs. How can you just do this in a procurement procedure? If you, for example, decide to move from, let's say you have proprietary software and now you want to switch to an open source software for your mailing server, it's not just the cost for running, adjusting the service, but it's also for migrating the existing service. So you will have some additional costs for when it comes to the migration that you need to look at. So it sometimes switching to open source for existing elements is not as easy as if you start from scratch. For example, the example that we've seen for from Finland, where it's about a software for childcare, which was developed from the very beginning as open source. I think that is not a problem, and it's good that you have done this. But if you have something existing, it is a bit more complicated. Usually, in the end, the cost will be lower, of course, long time if you do the long term.
Thank you, Mark, Christopher. So, Timo, Oli, would you like to react as well?
Well, yeah, go ahead, please.
Timo, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I think that the biggest challenge in operational level is lack of knowledge. So, because there's a lack of knowledge, there is a kind of a fear that I will do something terribly wrong, and something's going bad, and then I'm responsible in my municipalities, and my bosses are not so happy when I do this in this way. So I think that if, for example, if I would procure open source, it would be completely, I would have expertise to recognize the risks and the companies and the communities and what is what and how do I do the procurement. But if you go to the kind of a basic municipality in administrational level, so there's of course lawyers, but they are either way they are not so used to deal with open source procurement. So the municipalities, because there is no knowledge and there's a fear of doing something wrong, it's easy to go to the proprietary vendors because it's more straightforward process. So if I, let's say in ERP business, if I make a deal with SAP, I can always say that this was the best solution that I could think, even though it went wrong, because it's SAP, it's a big company, so I trust them. If you go to the open source side, you need to know more. You cannot, transfer your responsibility and the let's say power to the vendor and say that take care of it. There's a procurement and let's do it. You need to understand more that what you are doing in open source, and that's I think that's the big step in the operative level.
Yeah, well, I would say that you have some fields and products that are quite easy to use open source, like let's say web pages. You can use the common ones like Drupal, and because everybody is using that, or WordPress, it's easy and not a problem. But if you want something new, and you first need to know if there's already open source that has a good community developing it, and if it doesn't have, then you have to make a group of public procurement units to get enough mass to make the system have enough muscles, and usually that kind of getting a lot of different public entities to go together and make a contract between them, and there's some politician who says that okay, but it must have our logo in the front page, which is a bit difficult if it's same for everybody. So that kind of like bureaucracy and the work between different public procurement units is usually quite a hindrance if we have like a new open source solution. I also had the legal aspects, like you have to have a bit different IT regulations and guidelines than usual. Like let's say that who owns the IP? Usually it's that the producer owns the IP, but in the open source, you have to make some kind of a different solution for that one. But when it comes to the cost, it's easier to change when you have open source, because there's usually somebody else who can also do it. So I have done some competition where we changed closed software to the other closed software, and where we change open software to the other same open software producer. It's still a mess, but not so much as in the closed software.
Okay, thank you for your answers all. So I see the time, so I will move to. I suggest moving to the next question. And I think you anticipated a bit the answer also to this one. But the next question is the following. So, according to you, so we discussed the fact that indeed there were some also knowledge and skills missing. According to you, how could we build capacity, or what skills and awareness are necessary in public procurement teams to facilitate open source acquisition? We can hear someone's phone. So who would like to go first?
Well, we already had mentioned the basic knowledge of ICT contract knowledge, that the IP rights is usually the one that the public unit doesn't have enough knowledge. You can tackle that one by having like a pre-competition market consultation and talk with the markets how they think that the IP right should be arranged, and also see if there's any solutions already for the open software. So usually when I have done the closed or open software competition, we started the market consultation, and we ask from the markets like, what are the solutions that you have for this and that. So that's what I recommend.
Well, if I can comment, so I think that there should be. I think this OSPO is a good idea that was previously talked about. So we would need some more permanent transfer of knowledge, or people that have, the expertise of doing procurement in municipality level, and I don't see that happening municipality by municipality. So it needs to be some kind of OSPO that would be, or part of the OSPO that we could actually gather the expertise in regional or in other ways in Europe. So now when I'm talking about with the municipality procurement experts, I usually go the same discussions again and again and again and again. So something kind of a competence, development in municipality level in procurement.
Well, I have to challenge that you can always buy consultants. If you don't know it yourself, you can buy consultants. This kind of big units that you do the procurement for the whole country, they're usually very slow to do things. So it might take like 5 years, and then it's already old solution.
Maybe something that could also help was mentioned from you, Timo, was you have, let's say, larger municipalities that could help or support in whatever way smaller municipalities. There is actually a procedure already available that could be helping in this regard. It's a so-called dynamic purchasing system. The dynamic purchasing system is that you have where a central purchasing body is procuring or is saying we want to have hosting service using open source software for websites for municipalities, for example. They would usually also do the selection so any company can participate. And then when a municipality says, now this we want also to do is they could just use this dynamic purchasing system. They would not need to do a normal procurement procedure, but they can just say, we want to, based on this dynamic purchasing system, we are looking for a service. Who has interest to do this for us? And it allows, and the big difference between a framework agreement and a dynamic purchasing system is it is open to suppliers. So at any time, new suppliers can participate. So when you are, for example, Drupal was mentioned many times. You could say for Drupal services, and then anyone who's able to provide services around Drupal, they could say, yes, I'm interested to do this also for public administrations. And then when this smaller municipality is reusing this dynamic purchasing system, they already have all the suppliers that know about Drupal. So dynamic purchasing system is, I think, a very good way of helping smaller municipalities in helping them to actually not to procure normally, but already in line with a legal framework, and to take away a lot of burden for validating suppliers if they can do this. Maybe one thing was mentioned multiple times, because Drupal, you could just request a Drupal service. I would say it should be really dependent on the situation. I think usually it is a very bad practice to say, I want to have Drupal because I heard it somewhere. I think it should be left to the market of, you can still say open source service to do specific aspects, and then it is for the supplier to come up with ideas on how to supply this. Of course, if you have an existing infrastructure on Drupal, you should certainly say it needs to be based on Drupal. But if you do not have this requirement, then there might also be alternative solutions.
Thank you all three. I see that, so we have a few minutes left, and I see that there is a question from Ioannis in the chat, who is asking, are there any active projects using open source AI in public procurement? If yes, at what stage of the process are those tools being applied? And that is his question. Do you know of any project existing related to AI and procurement?
No.
I mean,
Not related to the open source one.
I think it's about the procurement stages. So yes, of course, it is used for already at some administration side, but also supplier side to not just Mistral, but it seems that the threshold of using even proprietary AI LLMs is used rather heavily. So yes, you can use it at various stages. You can start using it to say for brainstorming about what you want to procure, You can use it for improving the text. We see often that LLMs are used for chatbots to help suppliers to navigate in the public procurement procedure. Something that I would be very hesitating is to say buyers should use an LLM to develop procurement specifications, procurement documents. The reason is it seems sometimes LLMs provide wonderful readable text, but they contain a lot of shit in it. So I think it is sometimes it's difficult, because when you have an LLM helping you to draft the actual text, and then you receive a question from a supplier, and that you might not be able to answer it because you didn't understand in the first place what the LLM drafted actually for you. That is, of course, a problem. Maybe something that I found very interesting that was this week in a meeting, and it was about creating a report, and the colleagues were saying they were using an LLM for that. I was very hesitant about the way they described this in the beginning, but in the end, the way they described it, I think this is an LLM, how you can really use it. It is that they had a script to get data, to get the exact data, and then they use the LLM to say, provide a nice text about this. But when they tried to do everything with the LLM, they said it was not usable. So I think you should not start to draft procurement documents using an LLM.
Isn't
Yeah?
I got the question that isn't Mistral 7B like some kind of that they have released the code or something, or did I get the question wrong?
So you can get this. This 7B is from Mistral, a small LLM, and that you can just download from Hugging Face to use it on your site. You don't even need a large computer for it to use it. So yeah. The good thing about, and maybe something about a system like Mistral 7B or those small LLMs are very useful to summarize text. Sometimes they are not so good to write completely new text.
Thank you for answering that question about AI and procurement. So I don't see any other questions from the chat, and I'm a bit sensitive about the time. And I know also, Mark Christopher, you have to run. So I suggest we move to the conclusion of the event. So I will just share back.
Yes, I think we should wrap it up. 8 minutes to finish, and indeed one of our speakers needs to leave. So thank you very much for today's sessions, and that I hope it provided some inspiration for you, as well as practical knowledge that might help you in your daily work and move things forward when it comes to the adoption of open source in your organizations. A huge thank you to our speakers, Mark Christopher Schmidt, Oli Gilhe, and Timo Velihayu. Thanks for all your time and sharing your experience. And great thank you to all of you for joining us today. As the wrap up, I think that there's one main takeaway, but as you are all open source enthusiasts, you know it very well. As open source procurement isn't just about software, it's about transparency, collaboration, and the very important aspect is also about sovereignty. We would like to invite you to our next webinar. This time it will be, and this is very important for those that work for public administrations, but also for open source suppliers, since we are going to talk a bit about Interoperable Europe Act, one of the new acts that actually pushes public administrations to use open source, sharing their solutions cross-border and not only. And one of the best tools is, of course, open source. So we will be talking a bit about Interoperable Europe Act, but also how our resources can support you in complying with open source, with Interoperable Europe Act provisions. Please stay connected. Visit our open source collection on Interoperable Europe portal. Please remember about the upcoming Interoperable Europe Community Assembly on the 13th of November. And follow us on OSOR Interoperable Europe account on LinkedIn. We will share the presentation, actually link to the presentation and the recording via OSOR. So please stay tuned. And with this, I would like to wish you all the best, a very nice afternoon. Thank you to the OSOR team for the preparation, and it was great to have you all today discussing this very important topic.